What if boxing's undisputed world champion wasn't the one throwing heavy blows, but the one taking an invisible beating? What if the fiercest battle never went down under the bright arena lights, but behind heavy closed doors, tucked inside encrypted direct messages, discreet bank wires, and quiet verbal assurances that never survived under daylight? Because tonight, social feeds are asking one genuinely unsettling question. Was Claressa Shields played like a disposable pawn? And according to shocking assertions dragged into the media spotlight by one of the internet's most polarizing cultural voices, the reality behind this drama is far darker than anyone dared to imagine. We are talking about alleged hidden agendas, backstage traps, smiling photo ops masking razor-sharp motives, and a hip-hop power couple whose untouchable reputation is suddenly fracturing before our eyes. Remy Ma, Papoose, two names that once stood as the very definition of resilience and marital solidarity, are now getting dragged through a narrative loaded with alleged manipulation, financial trails, and strategic chessboard maneuvers where somebody is bound to be sacrificed. And here is the wildest part. Absolutely none of this comes from verified court filings. It originated entirely from hushed whispers, behind-the-scenes leaks, and insiders close to the camp, who swear this whole situation was mapped out in advance. Premeditated. So was Claressa Shields being genuinely protected, or strategically positioned? Was this authentic loyalty, or calculated leverage? And why is everyone involved suddenly scrubbing their digital footprints, deleting old content, and falling completely silent? Because whenever a blackout happens this fast, it almost always points to one undeniable truth. Somebody knows the actual reality is far louder than the curated storyline. And believe me, by the time this breakdown wraps up, you will never look at this trio the same way again. The saga doesn't kick off inside the ring. It starts with a faint whisper. A subtle one. The kind of rumor that circulates through private group chats for weeks before it ever lands on public timelines. Allegedly. According to individuals who swear they watched the dynamic unfold from the very beginning, this fallout wasn't random, emotionally reckless, or accidental. It was deliberate, calculated. And if those insiders are telling the truth, Claressa Shields didn't just stumble into sudden drama. She stepped right into a calculated trap. On the surface, everything looked perfectly clean. Coordinated public smiles, uplifting social captions, and joint appearances that radiated mutual loyalty and respect. But sources close to the circle claimed the atmosphere behind the camera was completely detached. Cold. Strictly transactional. Operating far less like a united family and far more like an executive boardroom meeting. That is where the earliest warning sign flashes, because whenever personal loyalty starts sounding like a negotiated contract, somebody always walks away with nothing. Let's look at the personalities involved. You have Claressa Shields, an undefeated multi-division world champion, boldly outspoken, brimming with confidence, and accustomed to owning whatever room she walks into. Then you have Remy Ma, a respected hip-hop veteran who fought her way through the industry's toughest storms to build a widely celebrated comeback story. And right beside her sits Papoose, the model of marital devotion, a man who built his entire public identity around standing 10 toes down when everyone else folded. Now ask yourself, when three massive personalities collide, does that dynamic naturally breed harmony, or an unspoken hierarchy? According to alleged insiders, that pecking order was determined right out of the gate. The rumor claims Claressa was never invited in as an equal partner. She was brought in as a strategic asset, a valuable name, a cultural shield, an emotional decoy, someone whose untouchable athletic credibility could be borrowed when convenient and tossed into the line of fire whenever things turned messy. And if that sounds harsh, just remember how many times the entertainment industry has run this exact same play. Social media users started connecting the dots when alleged money conversations entered the equation. Not formal contracts signed by lawyers. No official paperwork. Just loose understandings, verbal assurances, and handshake deals that sound great until the numbers fail to match up. And allegedly, the second Claressa started asking direct questions about the paperwork, the temperature in the room dropped instantly. Sources allege that what started as warm encouragement gradually turned into subtle pressure. Casual invites became rigid expectations. Friendly support morphed into unspoken debts. Suddenly, Claressa was being placed in narratives she never wrote, showing up in scenarios that served other people's brands far more than her own. standing beside controversies she didn't create while being expected to defend them. This is where historical track records come back into play. Critics quickly began resurfacing past moments surrounding Remy and Papoose, situations that were brushed off as minor misunderstandings at the time. Professional splits, high-profile friendships that quietly went cold, business moves celebrated on camera, but disputed behind closed doors. None of it legally proven, yet all of it resurfacing with fresh scrutiny. And the internet did what it always does, it took things to the extreme. Unverified screenshots began circulating across gossip blogs. Alleged audio clips, detailed testimonies from supposed mutual friends that sounded either too specific to be fabricated or too convenient to be trusted. One viral post claimed Claressa was pushed to take visible public stances, while the real decision-makers stayed safe in the background. Another insisted she was utilized as a human buffer, taking the brunt of public heat so the core brand remained untouched. Is any of it true? Nobody knows for certain. But online perception acts as hard currency, and once the public believes an athlete is being exploited, sympathy turns into collective anger fast. Then came the questions about lifestyle and spending. According to supposed anonymous tipsters, there were spending habits that didn't match verified income streams. Lavish trips, high-end purchases, quiet luxury upgrades that never made Instagram stories but circulated through industry chatter. Again, none of this is legally verified. But it was enough to spark the most dangerous question in celebrity gossip. Where is all the funding coming from? And when financial questions collide with dead silence, speculation fills every empty space. Claressa, on her part, reportedly started creating distance. Fewer joint appearances, zero public cosigns, noticeably brief responses. And just like that, the narrative flipped. The exact same commentators who once praised her strength began labeling her difficult, ungrateful, and impossible to work with. A classic industry pivot that frequently happens the moment a public figure stops following the script. According to one alleged quote floating around commentary channels, she wasn't supposed to question the game. She was supposed to play along. That single line set off massive backlash, because if there is one thing audiences despise, it is watching an elite, self-made woman get treated like an accessory. And here is the most suspicious part. Right when public chatter reached a boiling point, content started disappearing. YouTube videos went private, Instagram posts were deleted, and comment sections were locked down. That rapid digital cleanup only convinced audiences that something major was being swept under the rug. Because if there was truly nothing going on, why erase the history? By the close of this chapter, public battle lines were drawn. Claressa was viewed by some as an innocent victim, and by others as an active participant who miscalculated the risks. Remy and Papoose were framed either as calculating masterminds or innocent veterans being slandered by online rumors. And the viewers? Split, noisy, and waiting for the next update. And just when it seemed the controversy might run out of steam, a massive new name entered the timeline. A prominent commentator known for pouring gasoline straight onto burning controversies. A personality who never whispers but detonates. Once she spoke out, this stopped being a background rumor and turned into a full-blown media circus. Because regardless of whether you agree with her, whenever she speaks, the entire internet tunes in. And that is precisely where this story stops being about what actually occurred, and turns into a battle over what audiences are willing to believe. The moment that commentary hit the web, the controversy didn't just expand, it mutated completely. What began as casual speculation transformed into what fans labeled an unofficial digital investigation, run not by law enforcement, but by timeline analysts, reaction channels, and anyone with an internet connection. And standing right at the core of the frenzy was an unapologetic voice claiming she knew the entire play from top to bottom. According to her breakdown, which remains purely allegations, personal perspectives, and commentary, this was never a petty dispute or a case of hurt feelings. She painted it as an extended long game where power, money, and public optics were shuffled like cards at a high-stakes casino table. And if her claims hold any water, Claressa Shields wasn't an equal player at that table. She was merely a piece on the board. She alleged there were secret conversations happening behind closed doors, unrecorded meetings, and promotional plans relying heavily on Claressa's image as a disciplined, drama-free champion. A clean image capable of neutralizing external chaos. An athlete whose silence could be framed as consent. One alleged leaked direct message claimed Claressa was told to hold things down on the front lines while others handled business behind the scenes, alongside vague assurances of massive crossover opportunities, bigger media platforms, and executive access. The kind of promises that sound impressive on the phone but arrive with no dates, no contracts, and zero receipts. And when Claressa reportedly began asking for clarity, not starting a fight, simply requesting clarity, the dynamic turned cold. Support turned into emotional pressure, and questions were met with accusations of switching up. The internet quickly divided into opposing camps. One faction argued she fully understood the arrangement from day one, and only backed out once the perks dried up. The other side pointed out that this is how manipulation works. You never realize you are being leveraged until you try to walk away and the tension spikes. Then came the financial gossip. Unconfirmed figures began circulating. Six-figure transfers here, massive five-figure investments there, alongside claims of money moving without clear documentation. Stories of lavish private travel and quiet upgrades began circulating through close circles. Again, completely unconfirmed, yet fully weaponized across commentary channels. One supposed industry quote spread like wildfire. "It wasn't illegal. It was just dirty." That sentence alone went viral because it fed directly into the belief that the smartest industry moves don't break laws. They simply break people. Meanwhile, Remy and Papoose's refusal to address the drama became its own headline. No public denials, no detailed statements, just standard promotional posts and curated normalcy. To supporters, their silence proved they were unbothered by internet nonsense. To critics, it looked like textbook damage control. And Claressa? Her public demeanor noticeably shifted. Short captions, no banter, and absolute emotional distance, which only reinforced public theories that something significant had fractured behind closed doors. Reaction channels exploded. Some accused Claressa of clout chasing, while others insisted she had been taken advantage of. Edits and memes compared her past confidence to her recent restraint. And on the internet, restraint is often misinterpreted as guilt or anxiety. The most explosive claim suggested Claressa was positioned as a front-facing shield during periods of heavy public scrutiny, absorbing backlash so the real architects stayed clean. True or not, that theory infuriated fans who view her as a self-made champion. Before long, hypothetical legal talk entered the chat. Commentators began floating ideas of audits, contract disputes, and backstage arbitration. Buzzwords like breach and lawsuit were thrown around freely, not as confirmed facts, but as calculated possibilities. Rumors circulated that Claressa had been advised by seasoned legal minds to quietly step back, document every single exchange, and stop speaking publicly. Because once a viral narrative takes off, it doesn't need evidence. It thrives entirely on momentum. At this point, the story wasn't about facts anymore. It was about public perception. Who looked innocent, who looked nervous, and who stayed silent for too long. The fallout was already noticeable in brand relationships. Deals were reportedly delayed, collaborative projects stalled, and invitations quietly dried up. Nothing announced through formal press releases, just noticeable absence. And in entertainment, silence speaks louder than words. Supporters began asking the hard question. If none of this is true, why does the pattern feel so familiar? Because the industry has a long track record of using credible figures for brand elevation before tossing them aside once their value expires. And whether Claressa was an unsuspecting target or a willing participant, the idea that she was positioned instead of protected hit a nerve. By this stage, one reality was clear. Even without legal charges, reputations were taking major damage. And once public trust fractures, it doesn't need a courtroom ruling to fall apart. And that is when the entire debate shifted, from what happened to what comes next. By the time the narrative reached this phase, the damage was already permanent in terms of reputation. And in today's digital landscape, reputation is everything. Once doubt takes root, it doesn't wait for proof. It feeds on speculation alone. Online creators began predicting outcomes like sports commentators breaking down a championship collapse. Speculative lawsuits, theoretical investigations, and whispered financial fallout were repeated so often that rumors started feeling like established facts. The most popular theory suggested a quiet legal resolution. Private civil settlements, quiet contract terminations, and behind-the-scenes agreements designed to permanently sever ties before the situation exploded any further. Reports surfaced claiming advisors and managers were conducting meetings where phones were left outside the room, instructing everyone to stop posting and stop fueling the algorithm. Public reaction followed its usual course. Former supporters began questioning motives, old interview clips were analyzed for hidden meanings, and every quiet moment was interpreted as a calculated strategy. Critics argued that even without legal violations, the moral optics were deeply damaging. Major corporate brands avoid ambiguity, and having terms like scheme, manipulation, and pawn trending alongside an athlete creates instant commercial hesitation. Supporters pushed back, calling the entire ordeal coordinated slander against people minding their business, maintaining that silence reflects maturity rather than guilt. But on social media, nuance rarely wins against viral drama. The wildest theories suggested a scapegoat would eventually be named to absorb the blame and reset the public narrative, while others pointed to drafted statements that were kept hidden to avoid fueling the fire. Then came the financial speculation. Rumors of cash flow stress, lifestyle upkeep, and poor management forcing questionable moves. Completely unverified, yet realistic enough to gain traction. Over time, the algorithm began moving to newer scandals. Yet the digital residue remained permanently archived across thousands of reaction videos, video essays, and comment sections. Trust, once shattered publicly, takes years to repair. Commentators debated whether a tell-all interview would eventually surface to reset the narrative, or whether the entire controversy would be permanently buried to starve it of oxygen. One outcome became undeniable. Claressa Shields' name was now attached to a controversy she didn't start. Whether victim or bystander, her image had been dragged into someone else's drama. The exact risk of keeping close proximity to high-stakes industry dynamics. As for Remy and Papoose, the couple once celebrated for their loyalty now found every move placed under a microscope. Perception rarely waits for facts, it responds strictly to optics. The final irony? The commentators who amplified the story will never face consequences. Media commentary thrives in the safe zone of allegedly, and in my opinion, igniting viral fires without carrying any responsibility for the aftermath. And so the saga lands where most modern scandals end. Unresolved, unproven, and entirely unforgettable. Was this just blown out of proportion internet chatter? Was somebody genuinely manipulated behind the scenes? Or was this simply another case of social media turning vague rumors into absolute accusations? One thing is certain. The moment the word pawn entered the conversation, the game was already running. And in games like this, even undisputed champions can get caught in the crossfire. Now the real question is what you believe went down behind the scenes. Was Claressa Shields blindsided by an industry setup she never agreed to? Or did everyone understand the game until the heat became unbearable? In this industry, loyalty is loud when times are good, and dead silent when pressure hits. If this was just baseless internet noise, why did the energy shift so rapidly? Why were posts deleted, content wiped, and public figures suddenly stepping back? Drop your honest thoughts in the comments below. Was Claressa a pawn, or a player who saw the board too late? Who gained the most and who walked away taking the biggest loss? Make sure to hit that like button, subscribe for unfiltered breakdowns, and turn on notifications so you never miss another drop. We will catch you in the comments.